Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll give it just another minute or so to let some all the other folks join us.
Yeah, welcome, folks. Maybe as we're waiting, do you think now would be a good time to launch the poll so people can fill it out as they're coming in?
Let me do the accessibility statement real quick,
Okay,
and we'll get that out of the
sounds good.
way.
Awesome.
All
Thank
right.
you. Welcome, everyone.
Where to go? All right. Thank you all for coming today, joining us on this webinar, the Elevating Enterprise series. Communications, sorry. My name is Melissa Davis. I work for the Office of Equity as an event manager. My pronouns are she, her. Today we have ASL interpreters available for us, and we have Aaron and Aaron. We also have Heather doing our cart captioning, and to access that, you click the live transcript CC icon at the bottom of the screen that's next to the reaction icon, and then click show subtitle. I put in the chat the links to the presentation as well as the link to a video that will be a little bit later on in the presentation. And right now I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll for everybody to take a look at while folks are trickling in. So you should be able to see that. Talia, the links are at the very top of the chat. I will go ahead and repost those.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to our second session of Elevating Enterprise Comms. We are really excited to have all of y'all here with us. And I'm really excited because our amazing team member, Vic Vong, who is our digital communication accessibility coordinator, is going to be guiding us through the session today where we are focusing on digital accessibility. And I am Treyon Holiday, the Communications Director for Washington State's Office of Equity. This series is really meant to bring communications professionals throughout state government together to not only share best practices, but to eventually create, a shared approach to our work, build relationships, get to know one another, and find ways to ensure that the work that we're doing is truly making government more accessible for all Washingtonians. Comms work has a special, unique position to be able to do that. And so we're really excited to not only share some of the things that might be working for us, but also to learn from you all. This space is collaborative. We work to make sure that everyone feels welcome here. And we're really excited to spotlight Vic Vong and their brilliance in the work that they do for our team, but also in the contributions that they've been able to share within the enterprise around accessibility. Lastly, I will say we know this is a newer kind of topic for a lot of communications teams. And so we recognize that there are various levels of understanding of accessibility here on the call today. So thank you to Vic and Melissa for having that quick poll so we can gather the pulse of who's in the room and understand where folks are coming in at when it comes to your understanding or knowledge of accessibility, the different types of assistive technology and tools and devices that we use to ensure that all of our communications are indeed accessible. So with that, I want to pass it on over. Vic, did I forget anything? Did I miss anything? Did we cover it all? Okay. Looking forward to your sharing. I'll pass it over to Vic Bond.
Thank you, Trey. Wow, we got such a special like appearance by Trey to talk about the series. So that's really, really special. Thank you for coming, Trey, and sharing with us. And I'll appreciate everyone for filling out the poll. It's really helpful for us to think about where to focus our time because the field of digital accessibility is so big. And want to take a beat here and check in with Melissa to see if there's anything else that Melissa wanted to share.
I think we're good. Except I guess if folks have questions in the chat, do you want me to save them to the end or just jump in when it's a good time? What do you prefer?
Yeah, let's see. I think what would work best if it seems time sensitive, like it's a question about the slide or specific content, please let me know by like raising your hand or just coming off mute. If it seems more like a question that's for like general discussion at the end, then we can wait on it. And I guess that's a check-in with everyone else as well, so that people know how they want to engage. And you can put in your question, this is time sensitive. This is about this slide, so that we know for sure we should get to it right away.
Okay, perfect.
Awesome. Well, hello everyone. Good morning. My name is Vic Vong. I use they, them pronouns, and I am part of the Office of Equity. Today, I'm going to be, having discussion questions, but also inviting everyone else to talk as well. And part of why I'm really excited about today is because I know that so many people are excited about the topic, and it is a really, really impactful one as well. Um, and so I'm going to start doing this screen share and go over some of the logistics of my slides themselves. Oh, yes. And as I'm sharing, thank you so much to Melissa for helping me keep track of the chats and whatnot that I may not be able to see right away. All right. So welcome. If you are here for digital accessibility, you're in the right place. I'm Vic, as I mentioned. My official position name is Digital Communications Accessibility Coordinator. And I'll be talking a little bit more about that means. Another way of understanding it is thinking about digital communications. Those are our messages, our websites, our newsletters, things that we are sending online. An accessibility coordinator kind of speaks to the aspect of making sure things are accessible to everyone. And I'm so excited that everyone is here today. And yes, and next we'll just be going over a little access. Firstly, I want to thank everyone for filling out the registration. This really helps us understand if there are access requests. And thank you to Melissa for setting that up. It takes a lot of like logistics, so it really helps us prepare for what needs you may have. For today, what we will do is monitor the chat. I'll be going over the screen shares and anything important from the slide, I will be like verbally covering anyway. And we ask you as participants, please raise your hand and then before speaking, say your name. And this helps everyone know who's speaking, regardless of whether they can recognize your voice. It also tends to help the captioner and the ASL interpreter as well to know who's speaking. We ask that you self-monitor, you stretch, you stand, you take breaks, and whatever works best for you. We love to encourage people to take care of themselves as they are engaging. And as we all are here to learn and share, hopefully we can share and discuss with empathy. If you ever have more questions about our approach, you can always view our approach on our website. It's under the Contact Us tab, and the specific page is called Accessibility Information. And this is a place where you can just reference a little bit more if you want to see how we design our site, what you can expect from our content. And I know that one of my growth areas, I tend to rush through content. I want to like talk about everything. And so, especially because we have ASL on cart today, I'm working on like slowing down. And as we are all here, please feel free to let me know you're out there with reactions or chats. sometimes when you're screen sharing, it's like it's so nice to feel like you're not alone in a room. And so just putting that out there as a way that helps me feel connected to you. Um, and this is also a good moment to pause because if there are any screen reader users, I know that there can be different engagement preferences because chats can interrupt the the way that the screen reader can interrupt someone speaking. And so I don't think we had anyone mark that they are a screen reader user during this call. But if that changes, please let us know so that we can change a little bit of how we're interacting to make sure that everyone gets a chance to participate equally. And I am going to quickly look at the chat to see if there is anyone. Okay, I just see Melissa's messages about how to engage. Um, yes, I just want to give a moment to see if there were any needs that arose. And if during the call, something does come up or something changes, please let us know so that we can adjust. Okay. Next up, this is just a reminder to record, and I believe we are. Just to check. Melissa, are we?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Awesome. Yes. And this is just so everyone knows this session is going to be recorded. It will later be uploaded to YouTube after it's captioned. And in this recording, it records the screen share, I think myself, anyone else spotlighted. Um, and I think it can record people on video. So if you are someone that does not want your video to be part of the recording that will be uploaded, one option is that you can keep your camera off and use the chat feature. You can use the emoji reaction features. You could also come off mute if you would like. It does typically mean that your voice will be captured. So this is just so that everyone is aware of how it will be captured and can choose how they want to participate. Yeah, so a little bit about our office. You might have already heard of our office, but we are the Washington State Office of Equity. One of our major pushes is Washington for All. We know that in the state of Washington, historically, there have been disparities in education and employment and healthcare, and we want to make sure that everyone in Washington State has full access to all of these things people need, opportunities, resources, and power to flourish and achieve their full potential. And I thank you all for being here because we are all a part of making this a reality of why we are in state government to make the changes that we want to see. And Trey went over some of this earlier. Treyana Holiday, our communications director, about elevating enterprise comms. And part of the way of understanding the enterprise is just thinking about state government, the ecosystem of state government agencies. When we think about state government, we may not get a whole lot of chances to interact with people outside of our agency frequently, and so this is an opportunity to get to know each other, to share ideas with each other, share best practices, and even innovative ways that people are communicating. And hopefully this can be a start to building relationships and establishing shared practices. State work is not necessarily easy, and so hopefully this can be a way that we meet each other. We connect about our role as communicators. I think many of us enter state government because we care and we want to make a difference. And as communicators, we want to reach our audience, right? It's awesome if your agency offers X, Y, and Z, but it's more challenging if the public doesn't know that your agency offers that. And so one way of thinking about this is how can we reach our audience and build two-way communication? And so hopefully, this can be a chance for you to kind of meet each other, invest in each other and learn from each other because the work is not necessarily easy. I don't want anyone to feel discouraged in their path of encountering challenges, which happens in digital accessibility all the time. What matters is that we continue to serve the public and think about how we can be responsive to community needs. Okay. So, this is an exciting part for me because I love getting to know people. So I shared a bit about my name, my agency, and my position. And I would love to know who you are, your name, your agency, and your position, and what do you hope to gain from today? It is a little bit similar to the poll we had at the beginning, but I found that when there's an open-ended question, sometimes people feel more able to answer, or just can share slightly different things than they would in just like a poll. And so I'd love to hear people. And I can read off pieces in the chat, or people can raise hands to come off mute to just share a bit. I know we may not get to everyone, but hopefully everyone who wants to speak today gets a chance at some time during this call. And I don't see a hand yet, but I see a chat, so I'm going to look over at that. Oh, this is from Melissa. Any brave soul willing to go? Yay, I see one. Okay. We have Sasha from WashDOT, Department of Transportation. How to provide a guidance and training to partners and clients in the agency. Okay, got it. I have see another entry from Brooke of also WashDOT, Department of Transportation, different change management practices. Oh, okay. Folks are doing it at their agencies. I see one from Tim, OMWBE, Minority Women Business Enterprises, best practices, strategies, navigating challenges. Oh, wow, lots of people from WashDOT today. Oh, okay. I see one from Washington State Ferries. Is that the WSF? Bryn says they hold a lot of community meetings and are looking to make them more and more accessible. Okay. Yeah. See someone from Traffic Safety Commission, making communications more accessible, Traumatic Brain Injury Council. I see. Yeah. Wow. Thank you all for sharing. I think it's powerful that you were all choosing to take this time to learn more. And hi, Melissa. From OFM, Office of Financial Management, how other agencies are addressing accessibility needs. If I skipped over anyone, I apologize. But I think it's awesome that you all are willing to share. And hopefully we will cover a lot of things that people want to learn about. He's someone from Department of Service for the Blind, how we can share what we're doing with other agencies to encourage adding more people with disabilities to their staff. Yes, yes, love that. Yes, sometimes, people talk about services for an audience that includes disabled people, but it also means that like our staff, and there are so many people in state government who have disabilities and are very, very, very valuable parts of our workforce and should have really important experience to share with everyone. Okay, I may not get with everyone, but I love these shares and I will use this to inform what we cover. Yeah, thank you everyone. And hopefully you make some friends. Okay. And if you do still want to share, please feel free to put in the chat. And something to look back at as well and see if, someone in another agency is working on something similar or something that you would want to talk to them about. All right. So I'm going to go over what's to come. And briefly, I was going to introduce digital accessibility. I'll still do that, but since it sounds like there's a lot of people that are already familiar, I'm going to briefly go over the 3 basic concepts, and then we'll get to more of the strategy later on. It sounds like some people are very interested in the, how to, facilitate change management in your agency. What are some strategies for that? I put here dependent on interest, but it sounds like there is interest, so that's great. And at the end, we'll have, honestly, a lot of, I love collecting resources, so I will just share a lot of resources for further learning. I don't want to overwhelm people, but I tried to collect, the free ones because, there's, budget concerns and all these other things, so hopefully we can get people some tools that they could use. Yes. So we talked a little bit about the introduction. After the introduction, I'll go into the three concepts I mentioned. And the three today that we're going to focus on are color contrast, alt text, and plain talk. If you're already familiar with these terms, that's great. And if not, I will try to cover them enough so that no one feels left behind. And then we'll talk more about the strategies, and then we'll close out. So, this term digital accessibility, you might have heard it more and more in the past few years, and you might be wondering, why does it keep coming up? And one way to think about this is so much of our services and information now from state government and elsewhere, they're being shared online. This could include information about vaccines. This is also the place where people apply for unemployment benefits. That is also online. A lot of job applications are also online. But one of the things that we bring forward in our work is, okay, but just because it's online doesn't mean that it's accessible to everyone. And I'll get into an example in this next slide. So one of the questions people typically have or one of the, I guess, assumptions that happens sometimes is that everyone is sighted or they're a seeing person, and that assumption that everyone has sight. But I think in our work, one of the things that we can benefit from is asking ourselves, what if someone does not rely on sight? And there are many, many people, especially, thinking about all of the lived experience in Washington State, of people who use assistive technologies to navigate the world. And assistive technologies is a term you might hear. It's also called AT sometimes for short. And these are just tools that help people with disabilities navigate the world. And this could range from screen readers to assistive touch to a lot of different things. But that's kind of like the umbrella term for technology that supports people to navigate the world. And our part in this as communicators, we are sending out messages. We're trying to make sure that our messages themselves are accessible and compatible with the assistive technologies that people may be using to understand our message. So next, we're actually going to see an example. I mentioned assistive technology, and one of the most common examples is our screen readers. You may have heard of it, maybe you haven't seen it in action. It's not the only type of assistive technology, but it is one of the types that has a lot of, if a page is not designed with it in mind, it can pose a lot of barriers for people who are blind or low vision. So before I play this video, I want everyone to be thinking about these two questions. Listening for how were images described in this video? And then next, how did they jump to different headings on the screen? How did they navigate to different parts of the screen? And oftentimes for sighted users, an assumption, they'll just scroll down the screen and just stop whenever they find what they want. And with this thinking about digital accessibility, there are other ways of navigating to information and finding what you need that we can consider when we make content. So I'm going to stop the share and show the video. In just a moment. All right. I'll make sure that I share my sound. And let's do that. Make sure that the captions are on. And then while there are captions for this video, I believe there's not ASL. So we are making sure that our interpreters know that they will help us interpret this section. And I think, is someone unmuted? Does someone want to speak? Great. Yes, please, while you're not speaking, please mute yourself so that the interpreters know who to interpret for. I will start us off.
This is Mark Sutton from the University of California, San Francisco's IT Web Services Department.
Actually, I'm going to pause. Is this loud enough? Can people let me know? Do I need to raise the volume? Okay, great. Thank you. Just didn't want to go through the whole thing and then find out.
Here today with a brief tour of screen reading technology. I'm a blind person who has been using screen readers, braille writers, scanning equipment, other adaptive technologies since my childhood. What a screen reader does is, for example, I'm going to start to read this page.
Navigation 1. Link, University of California, San Francisco. Link, about UCSF. Link, search UCSF.
And what I will now do is slow down the speech rate.
Rating percent, 75%, 70%, 65%, 60%, 55%, 50%, 45%, 40%. Link, UCSF Medical Center.
So as I was about to say, a screen reader converts what's on a computer screen into information that can be displayed through synthetic speech or braille output. And it does that by allowing you to use a computer instead of a mouse, a computer keyboard instead of a mouse. You can also use a braille display as an input device.
End of navigation.
And what it does is it cleverly determines what's on the screen and presents you that information in a way that would allow for efficient navigation of these pages. So for example, I could just keep reading.
Banner 3 items. Visited, link, image, home.
Line by line, and we could be here all day. Or I could jump to the first heading on the page.
Heading level 2, search for heading level 2, you are here. Heading level 1, make videos accessible.
So as I'm moving down through the page, I can look for the category that interests me. And I'm just using commands built into the screen reader. So that's all a pretty simple description of what a screen reader is all about. Now I'm going to go over and show a few examples of how that can fall apart. So I have a couple graphics on this page.
Mark Sutton hands on a MacBook Pro image.
So the first one is well described and uses an alt tag.
You are currently on it.
To describe what that graphic is all about. Now we go to the next graphic.
Reader 042116.jpg.
Much less useful. So it's important to use those elements. It's also true for tables. So I'm going to move to a table.
FDA approved medications. Table, 3 columns, 5 rows. FDA approved medications.
Table. So the table is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm going to move into the table.
Medicine. Approved. Column 2 of 3.
And then if I go down into the table.
Medicine. Tolbutamide.
And as I move across.
Approved. 1975. Column 2 of 3.
We're getting the labels for the column headers and row headers. So it's important when programming tables, forms, and other elements on the web pages to use the proper HTML codes. I'll go to the
table 3 columns.
Second table on the page.
Medicine. Row 2 of 5 tolbutamide.
And as I'm in the table, I move across it.
Row November 1995.
I get a date, but I don't know what that date is associated with. So it's important, as I was saying, to include proper coding tags for all these elements. These are just a few highlights of a screen reader's capabilities and some of the ways in which the experience can fall short for a blind user. The life of students, faculty, staff, and visitors is largely conducted on the internet nowadays. Screen reading technologies can make many of these interactions work more smoothly. When developers pay attention to certain coding standards, blind persons are able to participate in digital communication, being able to do such things as understand calendars and schedules, enroll in or teach classes, conduct research, and many more essential activities that are conducted electronically. If developers of web pages and applications fail to take into account these design considerations, many people will be left out, unable to use these tools of daily life that are now taken for granted by most of us. The university provides a gateway to many key aspects of social participation. It's imperative that access to university offerings is not jeopardized. For more information, go to digitalaccess.ucsf.edu. Thank you.
Thanks for taking that time to watch that with me. Um, I'm Oh, I see. Melissa, do you have a hand raised?
I do. Thanks, Vic. Um, I just figured while you're getting
Yeah.
the tech stuff reset, which I know is always fun. I know this kind of repeats a little bit of what a couple of folks have mentioned in chat, but I know whenever I have heard or seen or heard about someone who has used a screen reader in their work for a long time, I am always kind of dazzled in a way by how fast they speed things up, which makes sense, right? We all, as we get used to what we're doing, we get used to doing it more and more quickly, and it makes sense to me logically, but it also reminds me how frustrating it would be to have that interrupted, disrupted, or have that not work for you, because it does give so much information to someone in such a short period of time. So, yeah, I think that was my biggest takeaway.
Thanks for sharing that, Melissa. Yes, I think that's one of the biggest, kind of, that's like one of my biggest warnings to people is like when they first look, just because the voice can be very, uh, fast, and then you're not used to listening it to that speed. And so I'm like, wow, this is really a skill. Like learning how to use a screen reader to navigate the world is a skill, that people who are blind and low vision and have other needs build over time. And so it's like also humbling in a way because it takes time to get used to a screen reader too. And so it's a way of it's like a way of reminding, okay, the experience is different. And yes, if there is something that's missing or not what they're expecting, it can really impact the experience. I'm going to look at the other comments. People mentioned that they didn't see someone use a screen reader live before, and that was helpful to understand why making things accessible was important. I'm so glad you shared that, Brand, because I think that's one of the big takeaways I had too when I first watched this video is like, you learn about screen readers, you might hear about it, but then like when you see someone who has lived experience, who's trying to navigate a page with it, it's like, can be kind of like, oh, like very direct.
Of the NHL draft. Not expecting it to get drafted.
Is there someone trying to speak? Or could
No,
someone...
I just muted them.
Okay, thanks. And then there was a question from Anne. The example he used of an image without alt text showed the image file name. Is that what appears on screen readers if there is no alt text? Sometimes, yes. It'll read like image 04219, or it'll say, I think it says like no alt text available. Either way, that can be not helpful. And so, yes, that is like one example of one of the results is just like it says it takes the file name. Someone said, Della said, didn't know tables could be coded. Interested in learning how to do that. Oh, yes. We may not cover that today, but WebAIM, WEBAIM, they have some great like articles about how to code tables correctly. I learned from that resource myself. And then Liddell shared, if you don't add alt text, the screen readers will read the file name. Yes, at times it will. Yes, and then I believe the image alt text can be set as decorative. Yes, we're going to cover that. So if, let's say that you have something you're adding to a page for kind of the aesthetic appeal, if it does not contribute anything that someone needs to know on the page, you can mark it as decorative so that the screen reader skips over it. And this helps the user partially because if they're looking for a certain piece of information and there's a bunch of alt text and they don't know which ones are relevant, it's going to make it harder for them to find the information they're actually looking for if there is irrelevant information. And so this is one way of also designing so it doesn't interrupt the screen reader experience. Some more questions. Ladad, something about Word. You can add table headings in the table design tab. That is true. And if websites, it is HTML codes. Unless your CMS or content management system is set up to do it automatically. Yes. And if that stuff sounds unfamiliar to you, if you're less in the technical world, do not worry. There are tutorials from WebAIM about coding tables correctly in Word, and also on your website. And I see next, great example to see a blind person explain and demonstrate. Yes, what is the best screen reader to use in tests, web pages, and other content? I have 2 recommendations. I'll actually go over one of them. I included one of them in the presentation because it's free. And so hopefully that can be a useful tool for people. And then someone asked, has anyone purchased JAWS or used NVDA to test out their own web pages? Maybe we can discuss that when we get to the NVDA page and we can hear about, what are other people using and whatnot. And then Melissa put in the WebAIM website. Thank you for doing that. Another question from Allison about understanding how to format a table in Canva. Canva is its own like every time you switch to a different Canva has its own like intricacies on what accessibility features they have available. I'm still hoping that they add more because they have more than they used to. But yes, it is very dependent on the application you use to make the content. But I'm going to move to the next slide and hopefully it shows the right view for you all. But we are going to circle back to that question about JAWS and NVDA on our screen reader. I have a page about screen readers. And then if there are other questions more at the end, we can definitely discuss. Fingers crossed, it will show everything correctly. Okay. And okay, so now it should be showing my application. And then if I click from current slide, do you all see a slide and not the notes?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, now if I do this, do you still see just the slide?
Yes.
Ah, amazing. Thank you all for your support. It was a team effort. It was not easy. So let me go ahead and skip to where we were. All right. So we went a little bit over this, and when we hit on some of the other topics, I'll reference back to the video so that we can go over some of the things that were hinted at in the video. So you might be wondering, for us in Washington State, what are our specific requirements? And to be specific, there is an agency called WATEC, and they help manage the digital policies for state agencies. They have a policy called User 01, and we recently renewed it. It used to be called OCIO Policy 188, so if you've heard that term before, it has now been kind of renumbered, they redid their nomenclature, their naming system, and so now it's called User 01. And the basic idea behind it is that everyone, regardless of ability status, should have access to state services and content. It specifically calls out something called Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG. You might hear it called WCAG or WCAG. And this is a specific set of guidelines that were published that I think a lot of a lot of agencies and companies use. And the level that is talking about, the version is 2.1, and that refers to, because each release is kind of numbered differently, and level AA is the level of accessibility that they specifically recommend for state agencies. We recently redid this policy. And so if you are ever interested in, helping inform the way that it's rolled out, how people engage with it, I think there's opportunities to do that. And I will share more about that later on in the resource slides. And then federally, people may be aware that there was what would you call it? Like a guideline around accessibility of web content for state governments. And I put the compliance deadline here, not to scare anyone. I don't want to scare anyone. But so everyone's aware, there is a compliance deadline of April 24th, 2026. And that's based on the size, how many people our state serves. And while it may sound daunting, I just want people to know these are some of the teeth, I guess you could say, to making sure that agencies and companies are, well, not companies, but agencies are moving towards making their content accessible. And within these, you might be wondering, so how do I know exactly like what to do and what to prioritize? And that's kind of what we will get into next. Okay, I'm going to take a moment. And so now we have a little bit of discussion. I know we've covered a little bit of content and then also some of the upcoming deadlines, I guess you could call them. And I'm curious if there is a current challenge that you're facing and if there's an area where you wish you had more knowledge or resources. And this, I think, again, can be shares in the chat. You can also raise your hand and we can call you to come off mute if you would like to express yourself that way. And we can give a moment for people to think about what they're willing to share. I see that Bryn has a raised hand. Please go ahead. And please correct me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong.
No, you got it. Thank you. This is Bryn. Something that I don't know a lot about, but would love to just have some feedback on or some thoughts on is we do a fairly good job of providing accessible formats, but we're not very good at talking about that publicly. Like we're not good at letting people know that there's a lot of accessible resources to go into how to access our content, meetings, all that kind of stuff. And I just was wondering if you had, or if others had ideas on how to advertise that a little bit more.
Thank you for sharing that. I can share a little bit of a thought, and then if there are others who have ideas, I think we have some folks who are kind of innovating in different agencies. First of all, I think it's great that you're acknowledging where you're at. There might be a move towards more accessible formats, but then if you're not sure if people know about them. One of the simpler ways that I'll mention in the presentation is to make an accessibility statement. This is a place where people can go to be like, oh, there is a place where they talk about their approach of what to expect, and then that you also have your email there so that someone can contact you if they have a different question or access need. And one of the things that we have found helpful is people tend to really engage with short videos. And so some of our videos this past year has just been like a screen recording of someone talking as they're going through some of the pages on our site and showing you where the resources are or what to expect there. And I think that that's sometimes helpful because people are like, if I click onto there, I don't know what I'm going to find. And that can be kind of a way of, oh, I can watch someone, go through it and then I'll know what to expect and whether what will be there is something that'd be valuable to me. And so sometimes those short videos, almost like a tutorial about, where the stuff is or what they can ask for, can be helpful to spread the word on social media in a shareable format. So that's one option. And I'll give it a beat to see if anyone else wants to raise their hand and share. And I'll also check the chat on answering Bryn's question. Well, thank you for asking your question, Bryn. And I think we may cover more of that. I'm going to share some strategies later on, and maybe I'll check in with you to see if it kind of answers some of the questions you may have, and others can share if they have other strategies as well. Um, yes, thank you. And I'll give it a beat. Is there anyone else that has a question about a challenge they're having or area you wish you had more resources?
Hi, just jumping in. My name is Sasha, Multimedia Design Lead for WashDOT. How important is it to review that our accessibility standards are met and still working? For example, like the web team has done usability studies on their website, and that's been really helpful in uncovering things that we can make improvements to on the website. But I know it takes a lot of time and resources to do that regularly. I know that's a pretty standard process for a lot of digital materials and assets, but I just kind of curious, like how often we would want to check in and make sure those things are good and they're working. Like we can meet a minimum AA standard, but there's the first level of A and then double AA and then triple A, which is like the best. But yeah, I think we're kind of still trying to figure out how we land within meeting the minimum, but still not stopping there.
Thank you for sharing that, Sasha. Yes. I think it's awesome that you have already done a usability study, and uh, maybe this is an opportunity to ask you, do you mind sharing with the group what a usability study is in case anyone's not familiar? And if not, it's okay, I can also go over it, but I thought it would be a great opportunity to get your perspective too.
Yeah, I work a lot with the web team, so I'm sure they can provide a lot more detail and context than me, but I was able to sit in on some of those sessions where we had a graduate group from UW. I think it might have been their capstone project. They were focused on a couple of our pages, which is for ferries, and the other one was for the mountain passes on the website. Also for how the app performs. So this is just based on the app alone, in which the usability studies were done. And a lot of the feedback that we received after the students kind of did some studies with different participants and um, really I don't have like the data as to what kind of participants, but a lot of them were, pretty avid travelers who use the app often, or they're trying to book tickets, or they're trying to check the passes in the app to see if it's good to travel. A lot of the data collected was really based around usability and how they can find what they need and quickly, or if we're missing anything that communicates clearly what they're looking for. What does the favorite option do? How would they be able to find how to make a reservation? Is it a straight button that they click and it sends them there? So there's a lot of just different things that we found that we could make improvements to make the app clearer for people looking for information.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sasha. And I see I I think first of all, I want to acknowledge thank you for sharing with everyone about usability. And it looks like Melissa, thank you, Melissa has put a graphic about accessibility versus usability in the chat. And to give a little bit of an idea, and also I don't want to steal your thunder, Melissa, if you wanted to talk about it. Um,
No, no thunder. Feel free, Vic.
I'm gonna see if I can I share? I don't know how. Um, I'm going to read it out if that's okay. So accessibility has overlap with usability. Primarily what we're talking about today. How do I move this? It's telling me to move a window. Are people still able to see things okay? Or am I blocking something?
You're blocking part of the image.
Ah, okay. Huh? Okay. Um, Melissa's put this graphic in there about some of the accessibility standards. So the standards that I mentioned mainly have to do with accessibility. And then usability kind of goes more into the what is people's experience with the site that we made. And this could be, it's pretty, in some ways, it's kind of subjective. Like, hey, were they able to understand the page? Were people able to find what they wanted? Were they satisfied with what they found? And that type of thing. And so usability can reveal usability studies where it's with users, like real users who are using the site. These are ways to kind of pinpoint some of the experience that things that you can change versus like strictly meeting accessibility standard. And it's still saying to move something. Am I still blocking the screen?
No, you're fine now.
Oh, okay. But for the question of how often, I would say it does kind of depend on the team. One of the markers that we have done so far was we did have a user study, and we did we do like a follow-up. I just do a follow-up check every 6 months. And I retest the top issues that we had in the usability study. And then this is also one that's important, is to encourage people to reach out if something changes and is no longer accessible for them. And I think when it comes to all of the guidelines, the goal of the guidelines, in my opinion, is to make sure that it's meeting the needs of a broad audience. And we can meet all the guidelines, but we still have to stay receptive to, is there additional feedback about what's easy to understand, what's hard to understand? And so one way, I guess the two things that I do is I just check it every 6 months, the top issues. And then I also just have that communication channel for people to tell me, hey, this link's not working anymore. Hey, I used to be able to access this page, but I can't anymore. And one of the, how to put it, like it might be more dependent on your team as well. Like if there are like key documents people frequently access, you can test those more frequently because you know that more people use them. And prioritize those for the most frequent checking. Another thing that I find helpful has been checking in with your content creators. Let's say that you're not the only person making content. If you notice when they make a new page or they add a new location to your setup, checking in with them to be like, hey, when I tested this page, I noticed this and this. Can we talk about it? What more guidance can I provide so that you feel more comfortable making like more accessible pages from here on out? So I hope that might have at least partially answered your question, Sasha. And if not, I feel like there are other people who might later on have ideas. I'm going to quickly check the chat, see if there are other questions. Yes. And then Melissa also put in the chat plain language always. Yes. Everyone can take part in plain talk, and we will talk more about that. I'm almost like, Melissa, do you want to be our guest speaker? Okay. So while all these things may be daunting, I want to share with you all a resource that has helped me in my journey. There's something called the WebAIM Million Report. WebAIM is a nonprofit. They do this scan of the top million home pages. And it's an automated scan, so there can be errors, but it's generally to get an overall idea of what are some of the challenges going on websites. And they found that 96 of all the errors that they detected on home pages fell into one of 6 categories. And the first 2 that I'm going to read are low contrast text. That's where the text does not stand out enough from the background for someone to read it well. And number 2 is missing alternative text for images. So this is kind of like the example in the video where instead of saying, hands at a laptop, for the alt text, it said something like image 042116. And so it was missing an alt text for what someone was supposed to visually get from that image. some of the other topics to be aware of for the future, missing form input labels. So when there's a form on a web page, if one of the form fields doesn't have a label, this can make it harder for someone who's using a screen reader or has other disabilities. There's also, I think, issues with empty links or empty buttons, and also missing document language. And this is, something that says, hey, this page is in English, so that the screen reader knows, oh, I'm going to, use the English version to read out to the person. And we're not going to go all the way in depth with all 6 of these. I'm going to focus on the top 2. And the reason I mention this is not to make anyone feel like, you have to master everything from A to Z. But it's to give you an idea that if most of the errors detected on home pages fall into these 6 categories, just working on these top categories can significantly improve accessibility on the web. And one of the notes, so WebAIM, they do this report every year, and they have found that these have been the same common errors for the past 5 years. And so it's a sign basically that, it's a good place to invest some of your energy and time. And it's not something that's going to suddenly, not be useful next year or relevant next year. These are kind of persistent issues. And so if we look at it from that way, addressing it from that perspective can significantly improve the errors overall. And let's see. Oh, yes. Okay, I see a question. What is empty links or empty buttons? How to describe it? Like on a page, if there is sometimes so when you go through a page in HTML, which is how the page is coded, like each link and each button needs like a coded label. And sometimes it has the label, but it doesn't have like the actual link. Sometimes it has a button, but then it doesn't have the components that it needs. And so maybe something is not being labeled, or it's not, like if you're a visual user, you can tell that this button is going to this page. But if you're using a screen reader, maybe it's not reading the label, or it's not reading that it's a link at all. And so empty links and buttons kind of speak to that mismatch of there's some piece of information that's missing, that on a page someone could get visually, but it's not coded in such a way that it's being read correctly to the screen reader as this is a link, this is where it's going. That's kind of like a light way of describing it, but I do have actually more resources on descriptive links at the end of the presentation, which I hope will help a bit. Yes, thank you for the question. And there's another one. Yes, and so someone mentioned that links and buttons need alt text. So that's kind of like a way of thinking about when we think about screen readers, it's like, is it getting the information? Is it coded correctly so that the screen reader knows what to announce to the user? And that type of thing. It may not always be called, it might be called different things, but that's kind of like the general idea. And I appreciate also people chiming in with their insights on this. So, and this is another graphic that kind of gets to the idea. There are common accessibility errors, and that we can address many areas of errors by understanding some of these most common areas. And we mentioned already, and it was hinted at in the video as well, the text contrast. There's this graphic on the left that says 4.5 to 1, and that represents the color ratio, the color contrast ratio. And so when we think about text, if we have tan text against a beige background, it's not necessarily going to be very visible. We want text that stands out well from the background, and this is basically called color contrast or text contrast. And in WCAG, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, their specific ratio is 4.5 to 1. And the idea is that when you input your colors into a tester, the number that you want to come out is 4.5 or more. And I'll show you a tester on the next page. Something we also mentioned was the alt text. And this is the text alternative. It's the example where in the video, I think Mark said, hands at a laptop versus image 042116. And so the idea is these are two of the most common ones that we can address and educate our teams about. And one example of strategy is, let's say that your team is really starting from scratch. You can pick two or three of the most top ones. You could put more if you would like, but it's about however you want to get on this pathway with your team. One example is that we focused on text contrast, alt text, and captions for the past year. I think at the beginning, actually, we've kind of built from that. But those are three ways of saying, like, okay, maybe not everyone knows how to code a website. Maybe not everyone knows, all the intricacies of all the software. But regardless of whoever it is, we will need alt text and we will need good text contrast between the text color and the background. And so these are some of the ways that you can, kind of ground in an important topic, share with your team, and then continue to train them on the topic, even if they're not familiar with all the software. Maybe if people in the agency who are not on the communications team, but sometimes make content or work with you. And so these are some ways to introduce the topic and to bring it to that level. The other thing that we do is captions. I know that people are aware of the importance, but just to give an example, there was a deafblind staff member who, not a staff member in our agency, but someone who shared and gave me permission to share as well, that it was such a panic at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic because there was not a lot of information about COVID, and when it was coming out, occasionally it would come out in videos without captions, and so they, as a deafblind person, were just like not getting information, and it was creating more panic. And so one of the things we want to carry through, regardless of whether we're in a pandemic or not, is thinking about, okay, how do we keep up these essential access things so that everyone can get access to the information they need? And as communicators, we want people to have the information. And so this is one way of thinking about it. Let's see, I'm going to check. Yeah. Okay, so it's like someone's answered another person's questions. Yes. Yes. So there's a question about links. I think I'll share our digital accessibility page at the end. It has a section about doing descriptive links, so that someone knows where the link is going without just saying click here. And this one I'll try to go over quickly because I want to get to the strategy. I know many people marked that they were interested. This is really quickly a contrast checker. This is a free one. It's one where you can use a dropper. You pick up your text color, your background color, and you check that the contrast ratio is 4.5 or more. If it is 4.5, you're good. If not, you will need to pick a different color. And I am going to share a little story from one of our staff members. They sat in my run through for this presentation and they were like, oh, use this story to include accessibility from the beginning. We have a team member named Anisha, and I think they made like 30 maps. And on the maps, they didn't test the colors ahead of time. And then after they made the maps, they tested the color and they realized that the text label on the map did not meet contrast requirements. So then they had to go back and fix 30 plus maps. And they were saying, now we know, in the future, we would definitely test it in the beginning so we don't have to redo 30 maps. But we kind of share that as an example of like, we don't want anyone else to go through this. Hopefully, it'll help people remember to test at the beginning rather than find out at the end and then have to redo everything. So I'm going to briefly also go over alt text, which I mentioned earlier. it's a text description of something visual. It can support people who, as we mentioned, are low vision or blind, but it can also support people who have limited internet or slow internet. In some cases, the alt text might show instead of the image itself, instead of loading the image. One of the formulas that we can recommend, it's subject, action, and context. And so one example was the one in the video where Mark was like, hands at a keyboard. And that was what was relevant for that page. But you can put the most important information first. And this is because if there is really long alt text, people using screen readers will tend to skip over. If there's like, it's long, they don't know if it's going to get to any information they actually need. So put the most important information first in case they skip over it. And also that they know, is there going to be something relevant from this that I will need? And one way to do this in Word, which, in Word or Outlook, or PowerPoint, you can right click an image and click view alt text. If you're someone with wrist issues and you prefer to use a keyboard shortcut, you can tab to the item and then press Shift and F10, and it'll open this alt text window. In this alt text window, you can either write the alt text as we mentioned, or you can check the box for decorative if it's for decoration. And one way to think about this is, if you have a flyer and it's telling you where an event is, what time it is, and stuff like that. You want to put that alt text at the beginning because that's the information people need to take action to go to the event. If there's more information that's more decoration, you can consider leaving it out. Or if it's meaningful to the tone or to the vibe of your graphic in general and it's important artistically, you can include it, but make sure that you do not put it ahead of the most critical information. And I put this is also going to be at the end, but there's a link to a decision tree. And it's one way if you're not sure, it asks you hey, is this text, is this graphic already including this text in the body and stuff like that. And it kind of helps you think through an exercise. Does this need alt text or not? I'm gonna take a moment. Yes, and there's more. I see a comment from Allison. I'm confused about the link alt text. So when you, how to describe it? So someone asked about if the link text says go to this thing and the alt text says go to this thing, will a screen reader announce the information twice? So when you're making a link, you can just select the text, press Control K, and then add your link. And the part that will show up, be read to the screen reader, is the text that you have highlighted. It will not read out the entire URL. And so it will not announce the same information twice. So I hope that makes sense. And then, yeah, Sasha mentioned there's other aspects that affect color contrast. I know that people want to get to the strategy, so I'm not going to spend all of the time on some of the details, but those are really important as well. Yeah, and I think, yeah, someone also mentioned being colorblind and struggle with shading on massive pastel types colors. They also struggle with line graphs that rely solely on color to distinguish different lines and data sets. Making the lines thicker with bolder and distinct lines helps. Adding different dash patterns and or markers on each line also helps distinguish one data from another. Yes, these are all important things. I appreciate you sharing that, Mark, because there's even if there's so many things we could dive into about maps and graphs, because if we create content that is dependent on perception of color and doesn't have another signifier, it can make it a lot harder for people to understand the content. And so those are some awesome examples of other ways to distinguish solely from not just solely color. All right, so the next topic is plain talk, and this is, I think, a shorter one in terms of, I guess, the how to put the guidance. Generally, we want to create short sentences if we can. Another thing that we can do is substitute complicated words for simpler ones. I have a list from plainlanguage.gov that just has like examples of common substitutions you can make. And then if you're in a situation where in your graphic or message you have to use an exact term, you can consider following with a brief definition. So if you have to say per RCW, XXX. You could put in parentheses, for example, Washington state law in case someone does not know what RCW stands for. Another thing you can do is to use the active voice so that reader knows who does what. And it makes it clear, are you asking them to sign up? Are you asking their someone else to sign up? So it makes it more clear, who are you asking to do what so they can take action. And especially, I think one of the acronyms, ones that we commonly get is there's so many acronyms in state government. And one way of just helping people like keep up and understand what we're trying to say is expanding the acronym the first time that you use it. And I'll have a little, let's see. I have just an example of a community member who told me, they are a deaf community member who gave me permission to share this anecdote. Sometimes state agencies ask her for feedback on their documents, and she spends so much time just trying to understand what the acronyms are and what the jargon means that they just give up, because they're trying to understand the document, they want to get feedback, but if they're spending time just trying to understand what it means and then they give up, then they can't provide that feedback, and then that document is likely has other barriers for the public as well. One of the tools that I'll mention is called Flesch Kincaid, and this is a built-in tool to Word. And this is a way that you can find out what grade level are your documents, does your documents require to understand them. And the way that you can get to this in Word is to search editor in the search bar, open document stats, and then it'll open this panel, this editor panel, and at the bottom it'll say document stats. In this panel, it will actually have a line under readability that says Flesch Kincaid grade level, and that tells you what grade level someone needs to understand your content. And for one of the sample documents, we found that the grade level was 8. And we usually shoot for 5th. I think this was something I got from online. But one way to think about it is like, if your document requires everyone to have a college level education, it not only might be difficult for someone to understand, but it also might increase the time that it takes for them to try to understand. People may be quickly glancing at government messages or kind of juggling multiple things in their life. And so the more concise and simple that you can phrase it, it really does help everyone understand what you're trying to say. And next we have this discussion question. Can you see yourself using these tools? Maybe you already use them or sharing them with your team. And then if you have any tools that you like to use that you would share with others, and you can feel free to put your recommendations in the chat or to raise your hand.
I think we have about 15 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Let me think. I think we have to skip. I'm going to give a minute to see if anyone did want to share anything about tools, and then I'm going to go to strategies. I did want to save 5 minutes for questions. So I think we'll try to go through the strategies quickly. And there's a question about most state government documentations required to be at 8th grade reading level. Has that changed? Oh, I'd love to see if there's a requirement like that we can cite. I have not seen it, but happy to share it. Happy to learn more about it. We personally just shoot for the 5th grade because of what we've seen in different studies about people being able to understand that 8th grade can be more challenging than 5th grade. So one of the strategies that we kind of mentioned was that you want to create two-way communication with your audience. And so one of the simpler ways is to put, contact info for if people have access questions. And this is one way to find out, like what are their priorities and what info do they need most? And if you think about it from their perspective, like, they don't, if there isn't a contact info that says you can contact us for access questions, sometimes people are like, you know, do they even check the inbox? If I make a request, will they understand what I'm talking about? And so this is one way of kind of helping people find what they're looking for and just being responsive because past experiences with government may not have been accessible. And so this is one way to kind of build a relationship and provide information and encourage them, hey, if you contact us again, we'll definitely try to help you find what you're looking for. Another example that we do is that we had the user study, and in the user study, we realized that people really like fillable forms. They did not like PDFs as much. And so this is one of the takeaways from our user studies. Another example is because we put our email out, we had a deafblind community member who emailed us and just said, hey, since this date, this newsletter, for some reason, I haven't been able to read it. And so these are two ways to kind of be responsive to feedback and make sure that, you're valuing their contributions and their willingness to share feedback with you so that you can improve the experience for everyone. I wish we had more time to spend on the feedback. Let's see. 11:19. Okay, I'm going to go over the strategies quickly, and then I want to give 5 to 6 minutes for questions. I apologize about the rush. The next idea, which we kind of went over, was just using what's built into your existing software. Oftentimes people are overwhelmed by new tools. And so one way is to just introduce them to some of the user-friendly access tools in Word, Outlook, and PowerPoint. And then if they have a work device that is an Android or iPhone, to use the built-in VoiceOver or TalkBack. Another strategy that we have used was providing accessible templates. And these are things that we pre-put accessible color combinations, we pre-marked all the alt text, and then we train staff on how to use them. And then just overall summarizing, we got feedback through the email and user studies. We trained the content creators on how to use, the concepts of color contrast and alt text, use the existing accessibility checkers, and then we made accessible templates. And then there's more of like a Q&A because I wanted to talk to everyone more. But let's see. I'm going to pause here to see if there are questions and whatnot. I apologize for the rush because it's like, I want to talk to everyone for longer. But I do have my email here. We do have our email for access requests. And then we also always have our social media channels in the footer of our website. This is also a result of the user study where people had trouble finding our social media. And so I am going to open it up for questions. And you can put a question in the chat or you can raise your hand. So I'm going to stop my share. Yes, and someone put in the chat, the lower grade levels also help for people with English as a second language. Yes, that's also a really important insight on how accessibility overlaps with language access. Yeah, and I think one of the things that we're learning is when it comes to translation as well, when it's time to translate or interpret into another language, plain language can be huge for making sure that it's understandable in multiple languages and not difficult to translate for the translator and for people to understand. Perhaps while we wait for questions, I'm going to answer a question from earlier. There is a screen reader there's a screen reader called NVDA. It stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. and it is a free open source screen reader. This is a free screen reader that you can download and try out. It might depend on your agency's digital IT policies, whether or not you can get it. You might want to contact your IT to see if you can. But I think if your agency has approved it, it will be um, in your app center. I forgot the name of it. But the place where you go to download updates, and that is one of the places that you can go. It does take some time to get used to NVDA, and so there are tutorials as well. Um, and let's see. I see a question about, yes, it's called a software center. That's the place where you can check to see what apps are available for you to download. If NVDA is already there, that means that your agency has already approved your ability to download and use it. I see a question about what is your opinion on accessibility plugins such as UserWay? I approach all plugins with great caution. I think that there's been some movement towards improvement of the plugins, but generally speaking, there have been significant issues with like kind of companies saying like, okay, if you buy UserWay and use it on your site, it'll fix all of your problems. But it has posed additional issues for screen reader users who no longer are able to directly access the information on the page in a way that's accessible. And so I think there's like a fact sheet on like the dangers of plugins. And at the same time, I acknowledge that there might be some smaller like nonprofit groups that use it uh, as like a stopgap measure. And but I would approach any of that with extreme caution. It can create more issues for people using assistive technology because it disrupts how the assistive technology may be interacting with the page. Um, I see the next one is from Anne. Yes, good to remember that PDFs are not ideal for online reading, especially for those who use screen readers. Yes, whenever possible, have your text on the web page itself. That is always, I think, the ideal. And if you do have to use a PDF to make sure it's an accessible PDF, which WebAIM also has guidance on. There's a question, does this apply if Word was used to create the document and it was passed through an accessibility test before being PDF? So generally speaking, and others can chime in on this if they wish, people prefer to access a web page. If it has to be in a PDF, making sure that yes, if it was created in Word, that it went through an accessibility test before being PDF'd. But people do tend to prefer directly on the page without having to open, another app. And then I see something from Sam that says the Lighthouse for the Blind has done regular monthly webinars. Yes, and some of them have focused on using different screen readers such as NVDA Live and talking about how they work. If anyone's interested. Yeah, that's a great resource. Okay, I see your raised hand. Go ahead, Erin.
Yeah. Hi. I think I have like a half-formed question
Oh,
here,
sure.
but it's or maybe it's not even a question, but just something that I've been thinking about is kind of like a lot of times we're trying to do so much with like a PDF or cover all the bases. And Mark mentioned like using kind of different lines, and this is actually a question that I've been like thinking about a lot lately is like with charts when you're using like different patterns, and I get a little bit of like overwhelmed by a lot of things, but sometimes visual things as well. So I think the question that I am pondering is like, when we think about equity, it's not always the same, um the same thing across the board isn't going to work for everyone. So I guess that's kind of just the or like philosophical question maybe that I've been pondering lately is like, does it really make sense to say we're going to try to do everything with does that make sense what I'm asking with like with a PDF to try and or do we need to be thinking about like maybe there's a different way to offer the information in multiple channels or mediums?
Yeah, so I'm gonna answer your question. I'm gonna try to. I think one of the ways to think about it is how do I offer like the most usable version that I think could be used by many, and then if I have capacity and there is great interest, can I think about another format? I think one example to start with is, making a straight up web page can be more accessible than a PDF. And if, you put on your page, hey, if you need this in a Word document, if you need this in a PDF, like please let us know, then you can discover like are there other formats that people are going to resonate more with that they specifically want and if there are trends in what people are asking for. And I think the general like consensus is like on a web page is going to be more accessible than a PDF. And you can prioritize that first, but if there are like growing needs, then that is something that you can think about. I don't know if I fully answered your question, but if you want to repeat any part of it or others want to chime in, please feel free.
I'm not sure if I had a total question there, so it's more just something I'm pondering. So I appreciate
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
Well, we are down to 11:29. So I just want to thank Vic for this amazing presentation. Thank you so much, Vic. Really helpful for our communications professionals throughout the enterprise. And it's clear that we need to do a 2.0 for you all and possibly working with Vic to help walk through some of the creation of accessibility in our documents. Vic has worked really strongly with our creatives on our team to ensure that they know how to do certain things. And so maybe we can offer that in early 2026. But thank you all for joining today. We look forward to y'all using what you learned today to ensure accessibility is strong in all of the amazing communications assets y'all are producing. Thanks again for joining us for our session 2 of Elevating Enterprise Comms. We look forward to seeing y'all in our next session, Elevating Enterprise Comms. Melissa, really quickly, when is the next session and when?
Um, I believe it's November 12th. It will be in the
You know,
follow-up email with the link to registration.
thank you with the title so y'all can know what topics we'll be covering then. Thanks, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. Have a great day.